I can't begin to tell you throughout the years, I've had people tell me, Devin, I want to sound just like you. I want to sound like a native speaker. I want to sound like an American. How can I get rid of my accent? And I always cringe every time I hear that just because I know that accent is not the problem. I will say it again for the people in the back. Your accent is not the problem. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Frustrated to Fluent. My name is Devin Bruce, and I am so excited to start this podcast. So, thank you for tuning into my first and pilot episode. I cannot wait to get started. So, in regards to how this is going to work, so for my first episode, I'm going to officially introduce myself. Then, I'm going to talk about my journey and how I got to this point. And then I'm going to talk about my podcast and what kind of podcast I'm going to have. And then finally, I'm going to talk about 3 huge misconceptions that people have about English. And hopefully, I can debunk some of those things. So, anyway, to officially get started and also to introduce myself, my name is Devin Bruce, and I'm the founder of English Communication Academy. We help non native English speaking medical professionals gain the skills they need so that way they can thrive in their careers. So, we don't teach them English because they already know it, they use it every day in healthcare. However, there's a language gap between the textbook English that they know and the everyday working man's English that they need in order to communicate effectively. So we essentially just bridge that gap for them. We focus on things that they don't learn in textbooks. So that's the thing that I love about what we do because we pretty much only work with people who are already fluent. We're not for beginners, and so it's a really nice way to bridge people's language gaps so that way they can be the best versions of themselves, actually. And oftentimes I get the question, Devin, how did you start this? Because I know it's very unique and it's a different path that a lot of people don't usually take. So my path actually began in 2016. Back then, my daughter was quite young and she needed to be homeschooled. She was in kindergarten and she was actually falling through the cracks in a good way. She was doing a lot of advanced work at the time and she was starting to get very bored in school. Anyway, we decided to homeschool her, and I had a corporate job outside of the home at the time, but I knew I needed to go down this path with her. She was starting to get very bored, and that glossy look of boredom that was starting to come in for her at 5. So I started to get nervous because I was like, I can't lose my baby to the system. So anyway, once I knew that homeschooling was going to be the way to go, I knew I had to completely switch careers. Everyone thought I was crazy at the time, but I knew deep down in my heart this was the right move. So anyway, I quit my job and I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. So I literally put my hands up to God and I said, okay, God, I don't care what I do as long as it's fun, it's rewarding, and I can pay my portion of the bills because back then I was still married. And that's how I fell into teaching English online. I got my certification to become an English as a second language teacher, and I just began teaching the language. I worked with a lot of box companies, that's what they were called. And so I worked with everyone. So I worked with little babies who were brand spanking new to English, all the way to people who were extremely fluent. Um, I worked with people who were 3, 4 years old to people who were retired. I worked the entire range of people. And it didn't matter where they were in their journey, they were just non-native English speakers. Anyway, I in that 4-year period between 2016 and 2020, I came across a lot of doctors in that time. And I noticed with that particular group, I kept hearing the same thing over and over again. I kept hearing things like, Devin, these regular English classes are not helping me because I'm already fluent. I know English. This is wasting my time. I don't need this. I need critical thinking skills. I need advanced skills. I need presentation skills. I need these things that I don't know because I'm already fluent, you know? And I noticed that trend over the years. And I also noticed a couple of other things that were absent in some of the other groups that I worked with. For example, I noticed with the doctors that they had a lot of weight on their shoulders. I felt that was a lot more serious for them in regards to trying to fix this problem. Not necessarily in other fields, like it wasn't a big deal, but because of some of the stories that I heard, they were talking about life and death, or they have to diagnose someone, or they have to deal with really heavy, difficult topics. And because they weren't able to communicate in the way that they wanted to, I felt that stigma. I felt that shame. I felt that weight that they carried with them day after day after day. And I wanted to do something about it. I loved working with them. I absolutely adored helping the helpers. And so I always had a soft spot for them whenever I started working with someone in healthcare. Well, at that time, it was mostly working with doctors who needed help. So anyway, in 2020, not because of the pandemic, but because my marriage ended, I was actually at my rock bottom. I humbly had to move in with my parents. I was 39 at the time. My kids were very young. I think my daughter was 9 and my son was 6. I had no money. I had no future. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I knew my salary as a teacher was just not going to cut it as a single mom. So how I thought of my business, again, I was at my rock bottom and I will never forget this day. I was sitting on my bed at my parents' house and I needed to go get bread and milk for my kids. And I had to check my account because I did not know if I had enough money. And lo and behold, I did not have enough money in my account to go get bread and milk for my kids. And at that moment, I felt like a complete and utter failure. I was already feeling horrible because I had to walk away from my marriage and I had no money. And I just, and people were telling me things that, how are you going to do it as a single mom and all of this stuff. So at that moment, when I did not have enough money to go get bread and milk, I felt like a complete failure. And in that moment, I said, okay, God, I can't feel any lower than this. Failure is not an option. What do I do? And at that moment, I had this thought. I was like, what is the biggest, wildest, craziest, most unrealistic dream that I can think of? And that's when I got the thought. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start my business helping doctors with their English communication skills. And from there, I got to work because I knew I had nowhere to go but up because I was already at my lowest. So I thought I was like, I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. So that first year, this was in 2020, I worked nonstop. I started off as an English coach and I had a 10-week program and I took on personal clients. And they were all doctors. And then after that, I scaled to group coaching. And then after that, I had a membership program that people paid monthly or yearly for. And that included online courses that they could do at their own pace. That included weekly sessions where they can come in and practice their speaking skills. This is all virtual, by the way. I had industry leaders and experts that came in once a month and they gave some sort of webinar or workshop for the members. We had a private server so people can network and collaborate with each other. It was very rewarding helping the helpers in this bigger way. And so now we're currently scaling yet again, which is really exciting by the time of this recording. So that has been my journey so far in regards to how I got into this line of business. And it is my absolute passion to help bridge the language gap in healthcare because it's a big elephant in the room. No one wants to talk about this. No one really is dealing with it. And because I've seen the transformations from some of the members that I've had, personal clients that I've had throughout the years, I know what confidence can do for someone. So in regards to this podcast, this is just the next level of it. I really want to do something more impactful in regards to bridging the language gap in healthcare. And thankfully, I have a good reputation on LinkedIn. So I have access to healthcare decision makers. I have access to thought leaders and industry experts. And I was like, you know what? Now is the time for me to amplify others and to really do something about this. So that's the reason why that I'm starting this podcast, just because it's time. It's time for me to take my life, my career, my academy, everything to the next level. So that's a little bit about me, my journey, how I got here, and why I'm starting my podcast right now, just like I said, because it's time. Now, in regards to the kind of podcast that I'm going to have, which I'm so excited about, it's going to be interview based. So this is going to be probably one of the very few times I'm going to be by myself on my podcast, because I love the idea of amplifying others, because a lot of people have amazing voices in this field. So the types of people that I'm going to be interviewing, basically three types. I'm going to be interviewing healthcare experts who know something about communication in the medical field, whether that's doctors, nurses, directors. If they have some sort of expertise in regards to communicating effectively, then yes, I'm going to be interviewing them. I'm also going to be interviewing language experts like English teachers, English coaches who are doing the work and they are very passionate about helping people with their English skills, not necessarily in healthcare, but they know a lot of things about fluency, fluidity, confidence, imposter syndrome, burnout, things like that. And then finally, I'm going to be talking to success stories in healthcare. So something that I've learned throughout this journey of mine is that a lot of non-native English speakers in healthcare feel so alone. They feel like they're on an island of one. They don't, especially if they live in a English speaking country, they don't see themselves in manager positions, or they don't see themselves going after their dreams. They feel stuck in a lot of ways. So I want to shed the light and give people voices for people like you, people who are non-native English speakers in healthcare and they're thriving in their careers. So the third person, or the third type of person that I'm going to be interviewing, are non-native English speakers in healthcare who are killing it in their careers. And so that way you know that you're not alone. You can do it too. And if they can do it, you can do it. So those are the three types of people that I'm going to be interviewing. And like I said, I'm so excited to start this journey. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about three big misconceptions that I hear all the time in English. And I wanted to do something like this in my pilot episode just because, sure, you've heard me talk about being an English coach all these years and I run an academy and all these things. However, these things I've heard like all the time. So I wanted to amplify this so that way if there's even just one person who is listening and this debunks these thoughts in their mind, then mission accomplished. So, three biggest misconceptions that people have about English, and I hear this all the time. The biggest misconception, and this could be controversial, I fully own that, but one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about English is that their accent is a problem. And I can understand why so many people have this thought in their head. I can't begin to tell you throughout the years, I've had people tell me, Devin, I want to sound just like you. I want to sound like a native speaker. I want to sound like an American. How can I get rid of my accent? And I always like cringe every time I hear that, just because I know that accent is not the problem. I will say it again for the people in the back. Your accent is not the problem. Clarity is the problem. Now, I say that because you can speak very clearly and have an accent. For example, my kid's pediatrician. I don't know where he's from, but I know he's not from America, but he has an accent. Now, as the mother of his patients, I don't care if he has an accent, because every time I ask him a question, he can say it, he can answer it confidently, and I understand every word that he says. his accent is completely irrelevant because he can communicate effectively. Also, your accent is a part of who you are. Your accent is a part of your culture. It's a part of your traditions. It's a part of where you come from. It's a part of your identity. And that should be valued. That should be a part of your story. That should not be erased. And I'm very passionate about that because the point of fixing it is not to sound like me. The point is to sound like you. You have the power in your voice. So, yes, you can have an accent and speak very, very clearly. People don't care about accents. They care about if they can understand what you're saying. Another example of that, I'm an Arabic learner and I am, how can I say this? I'm not fluent yet. I'm getting there. But I'm not fluent yet. And when I speak in Arabic, I have an accent. And people don't care that I have an accent when I speak Arabic. You know what I hear sometimes? I hear sometimes, oh my gosh, Devin, you sound so cute. You sound like an American speaking Arabic. And I take that with pride. Why? Because I am an American speaking in Arabic. I'm like, that's the truth. So I always ask if people can understand what I'm saying, if I'm clear. And the answer is usually yes. I embrace my accent when I'm speaking in Arabic because it's a part of me. It's a part of my story. I embrace it, I claim it, I own it. And I love the fact that I have power in my voice when I'm speaking in Arabic. So it's the same thing for you when you are when you are trying to speak in English. It's the same exact thing. So anyway, yes, you can speak clearly with an accent. Embrace your accent. It is a part of who you are, and that should be absolutely celebrated. It's never about sounding like me as an American or anything like that. The second misconception, this is really particular for people in healthcare, is that if you use these fancy $1 million words, you sound very fluent. And that is a big misconception in healthcare because, and I understand, I get it. Because as a non native English speaker, you already feel like you're getting looked down upon, which is true in a lot of cases. And so you want to make sure that you come correct and you let people know that you know what you're talking about. So I understand the thought process. However, we don't talk like dictionaries. And so when a non-native English speaker in healthcare is trying to use these big fancy words, a lot of people are like, they don't understand what you're saying. So a way to combat this is to just use simple, clear language. That is way more effective than sounding educated. People already know you're educated. If you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you have your certifications, people already know that. So you don't have to worry about trying to sound fancy and trying to sound educated because that is already there. The best way to deal with this is, again, use simple, clear, everyday working man's English because that is the English that we use. The textbook English that you know is very different than the working man's everyday English that you need in order to communicate effectively. And that clear language works in the boardroom, or that works if you are talking to your friends hanging out somewhere. It's the same English. Now, there is some differences. There is a thing called business English, yes. However, these fancy, educated $1 million words, especially if you're talking to like a patient or something like that, no, that causes a lot more issues than you would think. So yeah, use simple, clear language. That will help you so much when you're trying to communicate effectively. And then finally, a big misconception that I hear a lot is that the faster you speak, the more fluent you sound. And listen, that could be furthest from the truth. I remember back when I was taking personal clients and worked with some people and they just spoke so fast and I could not understand a word they were saying. And I kept hearing that over and over again. Oh, well, I thought if I speak very fast, I sound fluent. And no, it's actually the exact opposite. If you speak too fast, people can't understand what you're saying because a lot of your words mesh together. And so it sounds like one giant blob of stuff. I don't know how else to explain that, but yeah. So if there isn't any separation in your words, if there isn't any change in your voice, if there isn't any timbre differences or emotion or anything like that, it's just going to sound like one giant blob. So if you want to start communicating effectively right now, the best thing you can do is to slow down. And I know that's probably going to feel a bit weird at first because you're used to doing it, but I promise you, it's just like a muscle. It's just something that you have to develop. So if you slow down your speech and you develop that muscle, you're going to completely transform the way that you communicate simply by doing that because people are going to be able to understand what you're saying. So yeah, slow down. It's okay. You're not going to sound stupid. You're not going to sound like you're not going to know what you're talking about. People are going to be able to understand what you're saying. And that is the name of the game when you're trying to communicate effectively. Having people understand what you say. All of that extra stuff is not needed. Not something that we work with personally in the academy. So anyway, I hope that this helps people out there in regards to knowing that your accent is not a problem. Just not use fancy $1 million words, especially if you're dealing with patients or just like the like everyday people. And then finally, you don't have to speed up your speech in order to sound fluent. The key is to slow down. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to this pilot episode. I'm so excited to start this journey. I'm so passionate about helping people in healthcare bridge their language gaps so that way we can all benefit from your brilliance and your expertise and your passion for helping others. So thank you very much, and I will see you next time. See you soon.